Well, Ray's speech was so eloquent and beautiful, and of course there's a poignant aspect to the speech when he mentioned a colleague of mine and many of us in this room, Lana Jones. So I think it's appropriate now that we show you just a clip, and you'll get a sense of who she is and was.
WBZ's Lana Jones tells us some of the faces.
Live now to Suffolk Superior Court and WBZ's Lana Jones.
We go now to Lowell, where we find WBZ's Lana Jones.
WBZ's Lana Jones is in Cambridge with the very latest. Lana.
Mike, officials are emphasizing this might be.
WBZ's Lana Jones is at the church.
Lori, police cruisers from across the region formed a convoy. And Lori, the Walsh campaign is all ready to party in the Grand Ballroom.
She's a reporter.
In Yarmouth, Lana Jones. WBZ. In Stoughton, Lana Jones. In Ashland, Lana Jones. WBZ.
She's an awfully good reporter.
Lana Jones. WBZ. News Radio 1030.
That smile is priceless. To present to Lana's husband, please welcome one of the best in the business in terms of news on radio and a great friend and colleague, Rod Fritz.
Good afternoon, and congratulations to all of the inductees today. I first met Lana Jones, believe it or not, in 1986, when I was named the news director of WMJX-FM and WMEX-AM here in Boston. And we were beginning the task at the time of formulating a full-service music and information station. This, of course, was during the time when many radio stations in Boston had their own news departments, and the competition then was tough. Lana was already employed there, and I was very happy when she decided to stay at the station and become part of something special in the market. She came to Boston from Worcester and was always ready to learn, and boy, did Lana learn. She liked being out covering stories and would always seek my advice on how to make the story better. She always soaked up that information like a sponge. I knew from the get-go that Lana Jones D'Agostino was going to be a great broadcast journalist. She also had a great partner at home in Worcester, Steve Jones D'Agostino. Steve and Lana took each other's names when they got married. Lana continued on her Boston career by leaving WMJX, and she ended up at WBZ. However, we did stay in contact with each other over the years, and there came a time even when Steve and I and another Steve, Steve Brown, thought that it might be a good idea to go into business with each other. Since local radio stations began de-emphasizing their local news departments, we thought we would put together a regional radio news network. Thank goodness that never happened. Although Steve and I did have some fun times putting it together, and I'm sure that Lana had several ideas of her own. As I mentioned, Lana was working part-time at WBZ. Shortly after I left WMJX, I too ended up at WBZ, working part-time. We picked up right where we left off as well. Only now Lana was helping me figure out tape operations, the board, and dealing with management, something I should have paid attention to. We would discuss how much we both wanted to work full-time at WBZ, and eventually I left and went to work full-time at other stations like WRKO. But eventually I found myself back at WBZ, and again Lana was there to help guide the way. I observed her work and realized she had become the professional, ethical, loyal broadcast journalist that I knew she would be. Day after day, her reporting, her storytelling was outstanding. Made no difference what she covered. Events happy, sad, lighthearted, deadly serious. Sometimes it was long and drawn out, like the Whitey Bulger trial. You know, who else could take a full day's testimony to a courtroom, boil it down on the spot, turn it into a compelling and complete 40-second rap? Lana could do that. And she did it day after day because she knew her stuff. I miss Lana. think of her often. She always knew how to say the right things to her colleagues, her coworkers, always had the wonderful things to say to me every day when we worked together. Her time on this earth and her time in this business that we all love came to a far too early end on April 25th of this year. It was and still is a shock to all of us that Lana is no longer with us. But in a wonderful way, you know, she still is with us. Every time a reporter files a story, Lana is there. Every time a tough question is asked at a news conference, Lana is there. When an anchor tosses to a reporter in the field, Lana is there. And every time we think of the professionalism in our business, Lana is there. And I know she's watching right now. And I know she's saying, why all the fuss? I was just doing my job. Yeah, she did her job all right. And she did it better than anyone I know. Of course, the man who really knows Lana, her soulmate, Steve D'Agostino, and we all share in his loss. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor, it is my privilege to introduce to you my friend, Lana's husband, Steve Jones D'Agostino.
Well, I want to thank you, Rod, for those wonderful memories of Lana and for being her mentor for many decades. Also, thank you to Ray Herschel for his warm and heartfelt memories of Lana. And thank you for inducting Lana into the Hall of Fame. I want to start with a story that has a quite tragic nature to it, but it has its humorous side too, and it shows Lana's tenacity and fearlessness. It happened in 1997 in Colebrook, New Hampshire. A local man named Carl Draga had killed 2 state troopers, a judge, a newspaper editor, and wounded 3 other law enforcement officers. He died in the subsequent shootout with police. Lana got the call for that story while we were at home in Worcester, and she immediately packed her gear, got into the car, and headed the long journey up to the border, the Canadian border where Colebrook is. Took her several hours to get there, and when she arrived, she went straight to the compound for that Carl Draga owned, and she started to get out of the car, and all of a sudden police cruisers pull up, and the sirens are going, and the lights are flashing, and they jump out of the car and say, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "Well, here to report this story." And they said, "You shouldn't be here. There's a compound here loaded with weapons and explosives, and we haven't cordoned it off yet. We don't know whether it's set to go off." So she immediately got into her car and left the scene quickly, and was a great story that she loved to tell at family cookouts in subsequent years. So fast forward a few hours later, and she's at the town hall for the press conference, where they're announcing what happened with the shootout and the fact that Carl Draga is now dead. And after the press conference, there was no cell service in Colebrook, New Hampshire. But out on the street, there was one payphone, and Lana and a whole bunch of reporters immediately bolted out of town hall and ran down the sidewalk, and she beat, I think it was the Associated Press reporter, by a few yards to the landline, to the payphone, put in her money, and made the call and got the scoop. So that showed the fearlessness and the tenacity of Lana as a reporter. Lana was a social justice warrior. Her weapons were her Bic pen, her Shure microphone, and WBZ's 50,000-watt clear channel radio signal. Lana's passion and joy were covering our legal justice system, especially the courts and their trials. She wasn't an attorney, nor did she pretend to play one on radio, but Lana did know the law inside and out. Any lawyer, any politician, any bureaucrat who even thought to try to intimidate her or BS her very quickly got their own taste of justice. Lana did not gladly suffer fools or liars. Inspired by her father's love of the law, he was a lawyer and a part-time judge in Ohio. Lana believed in the genuine goodness of people and had a particular passion for increasing public awareness of the legal system and highlighting social justice issues. With this in mind, Lana spoke often with me about if and when we either retired or semi-retired, volunteering for CASA, court-appointed special advocates, who fight in our legal system on behalf of abused and neglected children. So it's why my family and I, many of whom are my family here today, ask you to please consider donating to CASA, for which we'll hold a Celebrate Lana's Life cookout and fundraiser around the middle of next year in Worcester. I'm proud and honored to call Lana my best friend, the love of my life, and my spiritual partner. Lana died tall in the saddle, pursuing her calling with passion and joy. And while Lana has signed off for good, her powerful and positive impact on our own stories will continue to be broadcast forever. Thank you for coming together today to honor Lana and for inducting her into the Hall of Fame. Thank you.